r/ask Reddit. What strange idea worked? Because people are weird? Wikipedia. It took a long time to become a high quality source, but the desire of people to correct misinformation is so strong that once there was a high volume of information, the quality gradually surpassed that of traditional encyclopedias. It's amazing that it worked. I remember writing most of the article on Jackalope and a good chunk of the one on mosh pits back in 2003 when they were both stubs. Is this what it's like to be famous? There's a store here in Seattle, on Aurora Avenue, called the Purple Store. Everything they sell is purple. It's been there for years. Sales skyrocketed when Prince died, not even joking. Over here in Minneapolis, sometimes it's hard to tell if something is a Vikings gift shop or a Prince gift shop. Twitch Plays Pokemon. Twitch Plays Pokemon was beautiful, taking forever to cut trees, spending 12 hours trying to cross that one ledge, making it all the way through Team Rocket's hideout and beating Giovanni only to dig out before nabbing the Sylph Scope, Bird Jesus and Helix and all the other Pokemon, and that final successful Elite Four attempt after hours and hours of grinding against them. I remember feeling pretty sentimental when the whole thing ended. Spending like a whole day to get to Giovanni's gym because everyone kept falling off that small ledge at the turn was by far the most entertainment I've had on an interactive stream. Googling the number 241,543,903 will result in tons of images of people with their heads in freezers. Somebody out there had a dream, and now it's a reality. Googling 4,636,228,756 results in the same, except this time it's washing machines. Where do you learn these things? He also issued an edict that farmers that refused to grow potatoes would have their ears cut off, so you know, whatever works. So then he's known as Kind Frederick out of irony it seems. Selling products by ending the price with $99 instead of clean whole numbers. My mind automatically rounds it now. If it says $14.99 in my head it's 15. They can't get inside my head. Yes. Fundraising money to make potato salad. It took us 3 days to make that potato salad. 3 days. I was at the beer booth giving out tokens. That was a great day in Columbus. Howard Stern made a fortune talking to strippers on the radio where you can't see them. In a similar vein, one of the very first radio acts to hit the big time was a ventriloquist. Edit. The pair I'm talking about are Peter Bruff and Archie Andrews. It wasn't a guy doing many voices. It was one guy and his puppet, who may or may not have been present for broadcast. One of the very first radio acts to hit the big time was a ventriloquist. This really should be its own response. Honey, hey look, a nest of flying thumbtacks. Bet they're hiding something. This should be the only acceptable way to describe a bee. Sting beans. Grey Goose vodka wasn't selling well, so they just tripled the price and sales went through the roof. Everybody thought, it's more expensive, it must be better and really fancy. Also, Grey Goose made their bottles so skinny and tall so they would have to be placed on the top shelf. That's really clever. Houston Airport got a lot of complaints that it took baggage too long to get to the baggage claim and people had to wait a long time. They moved the baggage claim farther away from where you get off the airplane, and even though it took just as long, because people had to walk there, they didn't complain. It's why elevators tend to have shiny surfaces in the waiting areas. If you put a mirror by an elevator, people don't worry as much about wait times because they can look at themselves. We really are just monkeys in shoes. A million pixel web page. That dude is a genius. But people who put ads there, weird. The people who put the first ads there sure are. Anyone who joined after a certain threshold was broken probably made a great deal. It was $1 per pixel, start to finish. In a psychology course we were taking, we were tasked with finding a way to improve the listening ability, tested through a multiple choice test after a lecture, of little kids. What worked? Blindfolding them, and letting them doodle as they listened. The doodles? Meaningless. However, they felt like they had freedom, and the only thing of slight interest was the teacher. So our class scored on average, I think, don't quote me on this, 5% higher than the other group's classes. Our class scored on average 5% higher than the other group's classes. Lily Leonid Godja 2017. Uma Thurduka. People in other countries are often more willing to be nicer to foreigners than to their own kind. Traveling around a small city in China last year, my friends and I were looking for a hotel willing to hold on to our luggage for us while we did some sightseeing around the city for the day. This can be hit or miss in China. Some hotels are willing to do it, some aren't. Except that day, we got turned down by about 3 or 4 hotels before we started to worry that we wouldn't be able to do much sightseeing. Being fluent in Mandarin, we suddenly thought, what if we decided to do a psychological experiment and play the role of helpless foreigner and see if things went differently? Sure enough, the next hotel we visited, walked right up to the front desk, and as soon as we started speaking English, the receptionist looked at her co-workers. I don't know what they are saying. My English is so bad. To my surprise, they pulled out a phone, called up their off-duty manager, and handed the phone to me. She spoke English, and so I explained to her what we wanted. She immediately said yes. Of course, we can hold on to your luggage for you. Enjoy your time sightseeing. This experience alone speaks volumes. But I've seen plenty of other stuff in my travels to suggest that locals can be downright nasty to their own countrymen sometimes. And those same people often are willing to pull out all the stops to accommodate foreign visitors. I have no idea why this is. Probably due to the perceived helplessness of being a foreigner somewhere else leads to the locals being empathetic to your situation. If you are seen as a local or whatever, then most people will say you should have been responsible and had a plan beforehand to make a good impression of their country natives to the outside world. Foreign money stimulates every economy, everywhere. Foreigners on vacation usually spend more for good service than natives. The Fumblerooski play in American football. For people who don't follow the sport, people who aren't American, the Fumblerooski is a play that has been illegal in the NFL for years and was banned in the NCAA in 1992 because it is too effective. For those of you who have seen the popular 90s movie The Little Giants, the annexation of Puerto Rico is a Fumblerooski. Essentially, the play works by having the quarterback intentionally place the ball on the ground. This is technically a fumble by the center's feet after taking the handoff snap, then faking a running play in one direction. While this is happening, a guard, another offensive lineman, picks the ball up and runs in the other direction. As dumb as it sounds, the play works because it's almost impossible to read a Fumblerooski as it's happening. Obstructed vision of what the quarterback does combined with quick timing of the intentional fumble means that you can't really see that he's done it. A defense would pretty much need to know it's coming to stop it. By the time the defense realizes what's happened, the ball can get pretty far downfield. Depending on how close to the end zone they were, it often results in a touchdown. They made that illegal? That sounds awesome. There's a legal variant called the Boomerooski, where the ball is handed off between the legs. It's also technically still legal in the NFL, but the intentional fumble has to go backwards from whoever is holding it when it happens. Edit. I wanted to add on to this. Fumbling backwards as part of a Fumblerooski ruins the play because it makes it a lot easier to tell that it's happened. Fumbling forwards allows the quarterback to make it look like the snap happened naturally and that he had the ball the whole time. Electing a billionaire to fix the system that made him a billionaire. You know, I've never heard it put quite like this. Haakerl, Icelandic shark. The meat of the Greenland shark is poisonous when fresh, due to a high content of urea and trimethylamine oxide, but may be consumed after being processed. The traditional method is by gutting and beheading a Greenland or sleeper shark and placing it in a shallow hole dug in gravelly sand, with the now clean cavity resting on a small mound of sand. The shark is then covered with sand and gravel, and stones are placed on top of the sand in order to press the shark. In this way the fluids are pressed out of the body. The shark ferments in this fashion for 6-12 weeks depending on the season. Following this curing period, the shark is then cut into strips and hung to dry for several months. During this drying period a brown crust will develop, which is removed prior to cutting the shark into small pieces and serving. Open bracket. In comic form. Hey, I ate that in Iceland. It was the worst thing I've ever smelled, felt, or tasted by a long shot. It tastes about how you'd expect it to. Yep. Passed on that and the hot dog bacon things. Did try horse in a little town called Hella, though. It was delicious. When I first started writing Android apps, I asked myself, what do people really want? Nudes is the obvious answer, but they already have lots of ways to send nudes. I'm not going to do better than any of 100 messaging apps on my own. They want to send nudes, and for there to be no trace of them to later end up on a shitty website. So I started working out an app where you could send pictures, on the basis that they could only be seen by the intended receiver. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this just isn't a solvable problem. Sure, maybe I could override the screenshot functionality. They could still just take a picture of their phone screen with some other camera. Can't be done, I says to myself. And I forget about it. The next year, Snapchat blew up. Turns out people don't need actual security. Out of sight, out of mind is nothing. But it's enough. That had not occurred to me. Turns out people don't need actual security. They need the appearance of security. The reality is apparently unimportant. A man decided he was going to try to get to house by making a series of trades that started with him trading one red paperclip. He succeeded in his quest to trade from a paperclip to a house. Selling used underwear out of vending machines edit. And this is my top comment. Thanks Japan. Where can I find one of these? Japan. Captain Cook noticed one day at port that sailors debarking from Spanish vessels weren't suffering from scurvy like sailors on British ships were. He couldn't figure it out until one day he noticed the food rations being loaded onto the Spanish ships and saw that sauerkraut were a part of their meal plans while at sea, whereas they were completely absent from British meal plans and diets in general. How do you get someone to eat sauerkraut while at sea if it is not part of their diet? You introduce it into the officers' meals only, of course. And then you have the officers dine next to the rest of the rank and file, where everyone can see the officers eating sauerkraut which they cannot have. From there, you wait for the rest of the sailors to ask why they can't have the new mystery food, and then you agree to compromise and allow all sailors to have sauerkraut once per week, as a reward for a diligent week's work. I don't know if this is true, but I remember hearing a story like this about tomatoes. The local townspeople didn't want to buy tomatoes, so the local King Baron made the local merchants stop selling tomatoes for a while so he can grow some in the royal gardens. The intended effect was that eventually the people would see tomatoes as a royal fruit and buy it when it came to market. Unfortunately, the story goes, the people were pissed at the King Baron for hoarding the fruit and killed him. Sucking milk out of other animals and drinking it. Are you telling me someone sucked milk out of a cow then spat it out into a milk box? Yep, someone. That guy who, fed up with littering in his neighborhood, put up a statue of Buddha on a traffic median as deterrence. Beyond reducing the litter, crime as a whole diminished, and local residents eventually built a whole shrine around the statue. Podcast source. Text source. Unboxing videos. Can't understand for the life of me why they're so popular. Edit. Today I learned there's a lot of people who need to watch a video to learn how to properly open a box. At least partly it's to satisfy the people who don't get packages in their own mail, so they can have the satisfaction of opening boxes by proxy. If you're about to buy something, it's always nice to see the exact unboxing process and what's included. Giving your credit card info and address to a website online in hopes they send a product to your house in a short period of time. I still remember as a kid convincing my mom to let me use her card to make the family's first online purchase, a pinball game. She was so resistant and paranoid to put her info out there, and dad was actually mad after and was convinced we'd been scammed for a week until the game actually came. And now I can almost literally push a single button and have an 18-inch rubber Coke delivered to my house within 2 days. Technology may have gone too far. Clicker games. The Last of Us? I have 141 hours on Adventure Capitalist and got all of the achievements. Why is watching a meaningless number get bigger so addicting? There's a story of a jeweler who accidentally doubled the price of her turquoise jewelry instead of halving it. Based on traditional economics, she should have sold less of the turquoise jewelry, but she actually sold out of it. It turned out that increasing the price of the jewelry increased its perceived value. https://blog. Kissmetrics. com/5 psychological studies. I first heard about this study when I was a student at a US university whose increasing tuition rates seem to be capitalizing on a similar pricing pattern as pioneered by George Washington University. https://www.nytimes.com the 8th of February 2015 Education Ed Life How to Raise a University's Profile Pricing and Packaging. HTML. Shit like this which makes economics so ducking impossible. That's why the first rule of marketing is that, basically, everything taught in traditional economics is wrong. The Snuggie. It's just putting a bathrobe on backwards. Not a fan of it, but apparently it's great for people that have to use wheelchairs. It doesn't slip like a blanket, covers a lot of the body easily while still allowing use of hands, doesn't have the discomfort of a thick collar or backwards sleeves that just wearing a robe backwards has, and is easier to remove for users and caregivers than coats or robes worn frontwards. Most 1800 daytime TV products are, originally, designed for disabled people. Once you realize this, they make much more sense and you stop asking who would buy this to any given item. Injecting yourself with a dead virus to protect yourself from live versions of that same virus. No, to most of us this process and how it works makes sense. But imagine how weird it must have been a long time ago. Body. I have found a dead enemy. Reverse engineer it to kill living enemy. That Goat Simulator game took off. Didn't see that one coming. Porn comments. Comparatively, the share to social media button on porn websites. Boaty McBoatface. Plumbuses. Everyone has one but no one knows how they work. Really weird. I have one but never used it. Not in there it's supposed to be used I guess. How you're doing? Everyone still asks it even though the answer is always a rote good. Mix it by responding horny. Real horny. Edit. Stealing Matt Bronger jokes gets lots of karma. Hey, you know this essential liquid to life that we can get from a faucet in our house, like almost literally for free despite all the work and technology that went into making it clean and safe to drink? Let's bottle it and sell the piss out of it. Have you ever lived somewhere with a 24/7 boil order? Makes it difficult to get to drink in short order, like for cooking or cleaning. Sure, boil a pot, but bottled water is much better for just drinking. Requesting things based on your username. Caesarean section. C-section. I can just see the first time. Trust me guys, I've got this all figured out. I'm going to cut the baby out and everyone's gonna be fine. Unfortunately, there was quite a bit of time between the first person who thought to cut the baby out and the first person who thought, hey, maybe there's a way to cut the baby out and not kill the mother in the process. Movies like Paranormal Activity, there's no villain, or really an enemy at all, just an invisible force that randomly opens cupboards and drags people down the stairs by their legs. The villain is the demon and the grandmother who made a contract with it, and it ducks with people to scare them, weaken their will and possess them, so that it can claim the soul of the firstborn male. There's 4, maybe 5, of them attempting to piece together a plot. Burning Man. Say what you want about it, but Burning Man is the most American thing ever. First of all, you've got a group of people who value their time above everything else, so much so that they often give up on the default world entirely forever, and end up being vagabond volunteers for various organizations for the rest of their lives. These people want to radically change their minds about all kinds of things in their lives, and interact with people who are willing to do the same, not just tag along like some spectator. Next, you've got an organized infrastructure, often made up of those same individuals, that manages to establish and maintain roads, keep clean thousands of toilets, provide medical help, distribute ice, collect and send mail, coordinate zones for burning things, deal with influx and exit of road traffic, run an airport and a DMV, a police, rangers, force, monitor activity near and past the trash fence, and 100 other things I probably don't even know. Then you've got organizations not officially within the Burning Man organization, that work within to provide all sorts of entertainment, knowledge, and things to do. From big name music artists to some dude who just rocks the pan flute. There are giant dance halls and bars, crazy experimental art installations, skee ball that's on fire, lectures and discussions, and oh so much more. All of this for a full week with no profitable motive other than the intrinsic nature of doing something you want and doing it well. Finally, it's all impermanent. Nothing stays. Everything goes. It's the embodiment of the American spirit to attempt to try something to maybe have a better life. But after the burn ends, it is acknowledged that those endeavors are only permanent in our minds, in our collective memories. Where we can live up to our accomplishments and own up to our mistakes is the domain where work exists year round as we gather our wits to decide what we want to do next year during that one specific week in the back rock desert. You forget the undercover federal agents chilling like Knox gonna be chilling. The unusual tendency of Homo sapiens to wander and explore, for reasons entirely unrelated to immediate survival. There is funny quirk to the human mind, something that came about in our evolution. It's apparent mostly in us Homo sapiens, more so than our past evolutionary ancestors. It is an insatiable urge to solve problems that have to do with unknowns or impossibles. I'll use an example that Michael from Vsauce used in his Supertasks video, https://www.youtube.com watch v = ff unnactfzecamper Homo sapiens to Neanderthals. We coexisted in Europe. Neanderthals were just as well equipped for survival as we are, and they stayed geographically in areas where they were successful at living. We Homo sapiens went to all sorts of non-advantageous locations, cold and remote northern areas. We spread to areas that we didn't need to, at least based on what we knew back then, and it was this spread that led to our survival. It led to biodiversity and a geographical insurance policy for our survival. We spread to areas that required crossing open oceans, with no sight of land on the other side. It's absolute stupidity to imagine how many humans must have died after standing on the coast in Southeast Asia. He put a raft in the water, looked at the vanishing horizon, and said, "Here I come." This is how we populated Australia Easter Island. In retrospect, it helped us, but at that immediate time, it was just an urge, a component of the human condition that equates to solving this unnecessary problem, with no apparent reward, is worth ignoring the risk of death. A hold my beer moment, if you will. Edit. Here is some further reading viewing on the subject. www.newyorker.com magazine, the 15th of August 2011. Sleeping with the Enemics. www.youtube.com watch v = ff unnactfzebs. www.youtube.com watch v = zxsgendk and index = 4 and list = plf17f07cfc 328029. Taking Bikini Bottom and pushing it somewhere else. The concept of, if you want to know the correct answer to something, put out a wrong answer instead of asking for the real answer. People are more likely to correct your mistake than answer your question. Yep, I think it's called Poe's Law. Facebook. Cooking shows. It makes sense now, but when they launched, they were lambasted by everyone, because in the pre-DVR era, who would be able to follow along in real time? Of course. The whole thing makes sense now because it's more of an educational approach than an interactive one, but at the same time, it also feels like a great tease to the audience. So, you want me to pay for a show where we film you cooking food the person doesn't eat, and you talk to them via the camera how tasty it is, and you don't pause to have them follow along, and you speed up the cook and prep time so a 3-hour recipe looks like it takes 22 minutes. That sounds like a strip club for food, without the benefit of touch or smell. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.